I never believed in fate until the day my flight got cancelled, and I ended up sharing a hotel room with a complete stranger. But I'm getting ahead of myself. Let me start from the beginning, because the beginning is where everything changed. My name is Marcus, and I'm a graphic designer living in Seattle. I was supposed to be flying home from a conference in Denver, one of those industry events where you collect business cards you'll never look at again and sit through presentations about trends you already know. It was late November, and I just wanted to get home, curl up on my couch, and forget about small talk for at least a week. But the universe had other plans. I was at the gate scrolling through my phone when the announcement came. Flight cancelled due to mechanical issues. No available flights until tomorrow afternoon. The gate agent's voice was practiced and detached, like she'd delivered this news 1,000 times before. Around me, people groaned and rushed forward, forming an angry mob at the counter. I stayed in my seat, watching the chaos unfold, already knowing how this would play out. I'd been through enough cancelled flights to understand that panicking wouldn't help. I pulled out my phone and started searching for hotels. Everything near the airport was either fully booked or astronomically priced. I tried 3 different booking apps, each one showing the same depressing results. The conference had apparently filled up every available room within a 20-mile radius, and now a cancelled flight had just dumped 200 more desperate travellers into the mix. I was about to resign myself to sleeping in the airport when I heard a voice beside me. "Any luck?" I looked up and saw him for the first time. He was tall, maybe 6'1", with dark hair that fell just slightly over his forehead, in that effortlessly messy way that some guys can pull off. His eyes were this warm brown colour, like honey held up to sunlight. He wore a navy blue Henley and jeans, and he had one of those faces that seemed open and genuine, the kind of face that made you want to trust him immediately. "Nothing," I said, holding up my phone. "Everything's either booked or insanely expensive." He nodded, running a hand through his hair. "Yeah, same. I managed to snag literally the last room at the courtyard about 15 minutes ago, right before the cancellation was announced. I got lucky." He paused and something flickered across his face, like he was debating whether to say what came next. "Look, this is going to sound weird, but it's a double room. 2 beds. If you're desperate enough, you're welcome to split it. I'd rather help out a fellow stranded traveller than let you sleep on these chairs." I stared at him. My first instinct was to say no. You don't just share a hotel room with a stranger. That's like rule number 1 of travelling alone. But as I looked around at the crowded gate, at the uncomfortable chairs, at the prospect of spending the next 16 hours in this airport, something made me hesitate. "I'm Caspian, by the way," he said, extending his hand. "And I promise I'm not a serial killer. I'm a high school English teacher from Portland. I was at the same conference. I'm pretty sure I saw you at the keynote yesterday." I shook his hand. His grip was warm and firm. "Marcus, I'm a designer, and honestly, that's probably the kindest offer anyone's made me in months. Are you sure?" "Completely sure. Come on, let's get out of here before this airport gets even more depressing." So that's how I ended up in an Uber with a stranger named Caspian, heading toward a hotel with a name I couldn't remember, making a decision that would change everything. We didn't talk much in the car. He scrolled through his phone while I stared out the window, wondering what I was doing. This wasn't like me. I was careful, planned, organised. I didn't share hotel rooms with strangers no matter how kind their eyes were. The hotel room was standard, nothing special. 2 queen beds separated by a nightstand, a desk with a chair, a TV mounted on the wall. Caspian tossed his bag on the bed closest to the window and turned to me with an easy smile. "I'm going to grab a shower if that's cool. There's a decent restaurant downstairs if you want to get dinner after. Airport food was disappointing." "Yeah, that sounds good," I said, setting my carry-on on the other bed. While he was in the shower, I sat on the edge of my bed and tried to process what was happening. I could hear the water running through the bathroom door, and I found myself thinking about him in there, which was weird and inappropriate, and I immediately tried to stop. But there was something about Caspian that had caught my attention from the moment I saw him. It wasn't just that he was attractive, though he definitely was. It was something about his energy, the way he'd offered help without expecting anything in return, the warmth in his voice. I'd known I was gay since college, but I'd been single for almost 2 years. After my last relationship ended badly, I'd thrown myself into work and convinced myself I was fine alone. Dating felt exhausting, and most of the guys I met on apps seemed more interested in quick hookups than actual connection. I'd almost forgotten what it felt like to be genuinely interested in someone. When Caspian emerged from the bathroom, his hair was damp and he'd changed into a fresh shirt. He smelled like hotel soap and something else. Something clean and masculine that made me suddenly very aware of the small space we were sharing. "Your turn," he said. "Take your time." Dinner was surprisingly easy. We found a booth in the back of the hotel restaurant, ordered burgers and beer, and fell into conversation like we'd known each other for years instead of hours. He told me about teaching high school English, about his students who thought Shakespeare was boring until he showed them the insults, about the kid who wrote a brilliant essay about video games as modern mythology. I told him about my work, about designing brand identities for startups, about the satisfaction of seeing something you created out in the world. "Do you like Portland?" I asked, taking a sip of my beer. "I love it," he said, and his whole face lit up. "I grew up in a small town in Idaho, really conservative, really closed-minded. Portland was like this revelation. I could finally breathe, be myself." There was something in the way he said it, a weight behind the words, that made me look at him more carefully. "Yeah," I said quietly, "I know exactly what you mean." Our eyes met across the table, and something passed between us. An understanding, a recognition. He held my gaze for a moment longer than necessary, and I felt something shift in my chest, like a door opening that I'd kept locked for a long time. "So," he said, leaning back in his booth, "are you seeing anyone?" The question was casual, but I noticed the way he was watching me, waiting for my answer. "No," I said. "I've been single for a while. You?" "Same. Teaching takes up most of my time, and the dating pool in Portland is surprisingly small once you've lived there a few years. Everyone knows everyone," he paused. "Plus, I'm kind of picky. I want something real, not just surface-level stuff." "I get that," I said. "I think that's why I've been alone for so long. It's easier than putting yourself out there and being disappointed." "But lonelier," he said softly. "Yeah, lonelier." We stayed in that restaurant for 3 hours, talking about everything and nothing. He told me about the novel he was trying to write, a story about two friends on a road trip discovering who they really are. I told him about my dream of starting my own design studio, about the fear that held me back from taking the leap. We talked about movies and music and the books that changed us. We talked about coming out, about family reactions, about finding our place in the world. When we finally went back to the room, it was past midnight. I was exhausted, but also strangely energized, buzzing with the kind of connection I hadn't felt in years. We got ready for bed in that awkward dance of two people sharing space, trying not to be in each other's way. But it didn't feel uncomfortable. It felt almost natural. I was lying in my bed, scrolling through my phone in the darkness, when I heard his voice from the other bed. "Marcus?" "Yeah?" "Thanks for taking me up on the offer. It's nice having company. I was kind of dreading spending the night alone in a strange city." I turned my head toward him. In the dim light from the window, I could just make out his profile. "Thanks for offering. You saved me from a really uncomfortable night at the airport." "We should exchange numbers," he said. In case we need to coordinate breakfast or the shuttle back to the airport." "Yeah, definitely," I said, even though I knew that wasn't the only reason he was suggesting it. We exchanged numbers, and then there was silence. But it was a comfortable silence, full of possibility. I lay there in the dark, listening to him breathe, feeling more awake than I had in months. "Can I ask you something?" he said after a while. "Sure. Do you believe in timing? Like, meeting the right person at the right moment?" My heart started beating faster. "I don't know. Maybe. Why?" He was quiet for so long I thought he'd fallen asleep. Then he said, "I saw you yesterday at the conference. You were sitting in the back row during the keynote, and you had this expression on your face like you were somewhere else entirely, thinking about something more interesting than the presentation. And I thought, I want to know what he's thinking about. I wanted to talk to you, but I didn't have the courage. I couldn't breathe." "Really? Really?" And then today, when I saw you at the gate, it felt like a second chance. I know this sounds crazy. We just met. But I haven't felt this kind of connection with someone in a really long time, and I didn't want to let you leave tomorrow without telling you that. I sat up in bed, my heart pounding. Across the small space between our beds, I could see him sitting up too, silhouetted against the window. "I feel it too," I said, my voice barely above a whisper. "I've been feeling it since you first talked to me at the gate." "Yeah?" "Yeah. The space between our beds felt enormous and impossibly small at the same time. I could feel the tension humming in the air, electric and terrifying and exhilarating all at once. "I don't usually do this," he said. "I'm not the kind of person who makes impulsive decisions or shares hotel rooms with strangers, or tells people I just met that I'm attracted to them. But something about you makes me want to be brave." I stood up, my legs shaky, and crossed the small distance between our beds. In the darkness, I could see his face more clearly now, the way he was looking at me with a mixture of hope and nervousness that probably matched my own expression. "Can I sit?" I asked. "Please." I sat on the edge of his bed, close enough that our knees were almost touching. My hands were trembling slightly and I clasped them together in my lap. "I'm scared," I admitted. "I haven't let myself feel like this in a long time." "Me too," he said. "But maybe that's how you know it's worth it. The things that scare us are usually the things that matter most." He reached out and took one of my hands in his. His palm was warm, and the simple touch sent electricity up my arm. We sat there like that for a moment, just holding hands in the darkness, and it felt more intimate than anything I'd experienced in years. "I live in Seattle," I said. "You live in Portland. That's only 3 hours apart." "I was thinking the same thing," he said, and I could hear the smile in his voice. "That's incredibly doable." "This is crazy," I said, but I was smiling too. The best things usually are. He lifted his free hand and gently touched my face, his thumb brushing across my cheekbone. I leaned into the touch, closing my eyes, feeling something inside me that had been closed for so long finally opening up. When I opened my eyes again, he was looking at me with such tenderness that it made my chest ache. "Can I kiss you?" he whispered. I answered by closing the distance between us. His lips were soft and warm, and the kiss was gentle at first, tentative, like we were both afraid of breaking whatever spell had been cast over this strange night. But then his hand moved to the back of my neck, pulling me closer, and the kiss deepened. It felt like coming home and jumping off a cliff at the same time, terrifying and perfect and absolutely right. When we finally pulled apart, we were both breathing hard. I rested my forehead against his, my eyes closed, trying to memorize this moment. "Stay here," he murmured. "Don't go back to your bed." So I didn't. We lay down together in his bed, fully clothed, wrapped around each other in the darkness. His arms felt safe and strong, and I buried my face in his chest, breathing in the scent of him. We didn't sleep much that night. We talked in whispers, sharing stories and secrets, kissing occasionally, marveling at the strangeness and beauty of what was happening between us. He told me about his first love in college, a boy who broke his heart by choosing to stay closeted. I told him about my ex, about the slow death of a relationship that had stopped working long before it officially ended. We talked about our fears and our hopes and all the vulnerable things you usually wait months to share with someone. But somehow, in that hotel room, with the strange intimacy of strangers becoming something more, it felt right to be completely honest. "What if this is just the situation?" I asked at one point, voicing the fear that had been lurking in the back of my mind. "What if tomorrow we leave here and realize it was just the weirdness of a cancelled flight and a shared room?" He pulled back slightly so he could look at me. "Do you really think that's what this is?" I looked into his eyes at the genuine emotion I saw there and shook my head. "No, but I'm scared it might be." "I'm scared too," he admitted. "But I think we owe it to ourselves to find out. I don't want to spend the rest of my life wondering what could have happened if I'd been brave enough to try." "Okay," I whispered. "Let's be brave." We finally fell asleep just as the sun was starting to rise, tangled together in a way that should have been uncomfortable but somehow wasn't. When I woke up a few hours later, my first thought was panic, that terrible morning after feeling where you wonder if you've made a huge mistake. But then I felt Caspian's arm tighten around me, and he pressed a kiss to the back of my neck and all the panic melted away. "Good morning," he murmured against my skin. "Good morning." We ordered room service for breakfast, neither of us wanting to leave our little bubble yet. We sat cross-legged on his bed, eating pancakes and drinking coffee, stealing kisses between bites. It felt domestic and comfortable, like we'd been doing this for years instead of hours. "Our flight's at 3, I said, checking my phone. "We should probably head to the airport around 1. "That gives us a few more hours," he said, reaching out to lace his fingers through mine. "Let's not waste them." We didn't. We talked more, kissed more, made plans for how we'd make this work. He'd come to Seattle next weekend. I'd go to Portland the weekend after. We'd figure out the logistics, the distance, the newness of everything. It wouldn't be easy, but we both wanted to try. When we finally had to leave for the airport, I felt a strange mix of sadness and excitement. Sadness that our unexpected time together was ending, but excitement for what might come next. In the Uber on the way back, Caspian held my hand, his thumb tracing circles on my palm. "I'm really glad my flight got cancelled," I said. He laughed. That warm, genuine laugh I was already addicted to. Me too. Best mechanical failure of my life. At the airport, we checked in for our separate flights. His left an hour before mine, and we spent that hour sitting close together at his gate, not caring who saw us. When they called for boarding, he turned to me and cupped my face in his hands. "I'll text you as soon as I land," he said, "or you better, and I'll see you next weekend." "I'm counting on it." He kissed me one more time, soft and sweet and full of promise. Then he grabbed his bag and walked toward the gate, turning back to wave before he disappeared down the jetway. I sat there watching until the plane pulled away from the gate, feeling the strangest mix of emotions. I'd known this man for less than 24 hours, but somehow he'd already changed something fundamental in me. True to his word, he texted as soon as his plane landed. Then he texted again an hour later just to say he was thinking about me, and again that night, and the next morning and constantly throughout the week. We talked on the phone every evening, those long rambling conversations where you talk about nothing and everything, where comfortable silences feel as good as words. That Friday, he drove up to Seattle. I'd been nervous all day, worried that the magic of that night wouldn't translate to real life, that we'd discover we didn't actually work outside the bubble of that hotel room. But the moment I opened my apartment door and saw him standing there with flowers and that smile, all my worries disappeared. "Hi," he said. "Oh, hi," I said back, and then I was pulling him inside, kissing him like I'd been holding my breath all week and he was oxygen. That weekend was perfect. We explored the city, held hands in public, cooked dinner together in my tiny kitchen. We talked about the future, about what we wanted, about how we'd navigate the distance. It was real and tangible and even better than that first night. On Sunday, when he had to drive back to Portland, we stood by his car for 20 minutes, neither of us wanting to say goodbye. "This is going to work," he said, his arms around my waist. "I know it's fast and it's crazy, but I really believe this is going to work." "I believe it too," I said, and I meant it. That was 6 months ago. Now, I'm sitting in my apartment on a Saturday morning drinking coffee and waiting for Caspian to arrive. He's been spending most weekends here, and I've been going to Portland when he can't make the trip. We're talking about one of us relocating, about making this more permanent. It's scary and exciting and everything I never knew I wanted. People ask me how we met, and I always smile when I tell them. My flight got cancelled, I say, and a stranger offered to share his hotel room. They usually look shocked or concerned until I explain the rest of it. How sometimes the universe conspires to put you exactly where you need to be. How a mechanical failure can lead to the best thing that's ever happened to you. How love can start in the most unexpected places. I never believed in fate before that cancelled flight. I thought life was just a series of random events, chaos without meaning or purpose. But now I think maybe there's something more. Maybe some connections are meant to happen. Maybe some people are meant to find each other, even if it takes a cancelled flight and a shared hotel room to make it possible. My phone buzzes with a text from Caspian. He's 10 minutes away. My heart does that thing it always does when I know I'm about to see him. That flutter of excitement and joy and gratitude. I get up to make him coffee the way he likes it, with just a little cream and no sugar, and I think about how much my life has changed since that day in Denver. I think about the man I was then, closed off and lonely and convinced I was fine alone. And I think about who I am now, open and hopeful and completely in love with a high school English teacher who writes novels on the weekends and quotes poetry when he thinks I'm not listening. Sometimes the best things in life come from the worst circumstances. Sometimes a cancelled flight is actually the universe giving you exactly what you need. Sometimes a stranger's kindness is the beginning of everything you've been searching for. The key turns in the lock, and then Caspian is walking through my door, dropping his bag and pulling me into his arms in one fluid motion. He smells like coffee and the rain that must have just started in Portland, and when he kisses me, I taste home. "I missed you," he says against my lips. "I missed you too. How was the drive?" "Long. Worth it." We stand there in my entryway, holding each other, And I think about how none of this would have happened if my flight hadn't been cancelled. How I might have gone home that day, returned to my lonely apartment, continued living my careful, closed-off life. How I might never have known what it felt like to be loved by someone like Caspian, to love someone with this kind of intensity and honesty and joy. "What are you thinking about?" he asks, pulling back to look at me. "Just how lucky I am," I say. "How grateful I am for mechanical failures and cancelled flights and strangers with kind eyes who offer to share their hotel rooms." He laughs, that sound I love more than any other, and kisses my forehead. "Best decision I ever made," he says, "offering that room to you. Best decision I ever made was saying yes." We make breakfast together, moving around my kitchen in the easy rhythm we've developed over the past 6 months. He tells me about his week, about the student who finally understood The Great Gatsby, about the chapter he wrote for his novel. I tell him about the new client I landed, about the logo design I'm excited about. We talk about next month, when I'm planning to visit his family in Idaho, and the nervousness I feel about meeting them. "They're going to love you," he assures me, "almost as much as I do." "Almost," I tease. "Well, nobody could love you as much as I do. That would be impossible." Later we're sitting on my couch, his head in my lap while I run my fingers through his hair, and he looks up at me with those honey brown eyes that first caught my attention in the airport. "I love you," he says, not for the first time, but like he's still marvelling at the truth of it. "I love you too," I say back, "and I mean it with everything I am. This is my life now. This unexpected, beautiful, perfect life that started with a cancelled flight and a stranger's kindness. This is what it means to be brave enough to say yes when the universe offers you something extraordinary. This is what it feels like to finally come home to yourself and to someone else at the same time. And it all started because my flight got cancelled and he offered half his hotel room to a stranger.